C'est parti.
Who actually decides day one wasn't our best day. Let's show what we can do here tonight.
Mini Miner, are you excited to see if anyone self-eliminates?
Il va encore y avoir une domination totipotente des Danois, donc de Sky Scroll.
For some online majors previously. It's not just about the win, it's not just about qualifying to globals as it was previously. There's almost more teams that are going to qualify through to a LAN now. It's going to be 20 teams that qualify through, so it makes a lot more narratives, a lot more storylines to follow today, and it makes it, I think, a lot more interesting.
It's going to be incredibly interesting, and I think all of our duos are waiting to see the direction of the battle bus today and which way those zones are going to pull. Because if we have a look at what it looked like yesterday, Levin, I think there are a few teams on social media who weren't happy.
Yeah, well, look, I wanted to highlight the positions of some of our top 5 players, right?
C'est parti.
Yeah, Pablo and Chino, obviously, who are sort of landing towards the east, Sires and Scary, who had a very
Je sens que ça va être assez épique aujourd'hui. Hein.
landing a bit further south. Then you have the likes of Thomas and Focus.
On rappelle que Sky Scroll, ils ont une trentaine de points de plus que Pablo Chino, qui eux, enfin ils ont une trentaine de points d'avance, qui eux doivent avoir globalement 40 points d'avance sur les troisièmes qui ont uniquement 300 points je crois.
I wonder why that is. And you look at the zones and you start to think, they had a bit of an easier day.
On voit que les late game elles se finissent souvent au milieu à droite de la map. Hein. Souvent.
Pablo and Chino's case, that is exactly true. You can see exactly where they land just there at in the sort of middle of those three circles. And it's
12 minutes avant le lancement de la première game.
But it does make it a lot easier. And the one game that they didn't do so great was that game 3 you can see up there in the top left of the screen. That was their bad game. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do today. But I think it almost highlights how good Sky and Scroll did yesterday as well, because they were a team that performed incredibly well. And if you look at where they were dropping, and of course Thomas and Focus, they are so far away from where these zones pull. So yes, it was great for Chino and Pablo. Yes, it was great for Size and Scary. But I think it almost makes it greater for Sky and Scroll, almost amplifies their achievement.
I mean, you can't act like this isn't what we expected from Sky and Scroll. That was the one factor we all said was.
Ouais, frère, ils sont vraiment méga jeunes. Ils ont 16 ans, je crois. Scroll, les gars, il a vraiment une tête de gamin.
They always seem to find the right solution, and I think that is a large part of why, yes, they are our first place team. And it's why I feel confident saying I think they will continue to be our first place team with the rest of the game today, because now what happens if they do get a couple more zones, right? Like what happens when they
C'est dingue quand même d'avoir 16 ans et de faire ça. Hein.
I think these guys are in for.
Ils sont vraiment boostés. Hein.
Really spectacular yesterday, Vinny.
Yeah, they really were. They were clutching up as duos. We had some solo clutches as well. They played their consistent game. And when I went back and watched a lot of their games from yesterday, in every single one of their games, they were staying so far back in the storm. They were staying in storm, sort of that 4th, 5th zone transition. And in every single game, they were just skipping all of that mid game. They weren't getting involved in those mid game fights. They weren't losing damage critically in those mid game fights as well. They were staying so far back in the storm. So if we're watching them today, which I imagine we will be doing a lot, keep an eye out for them staying inside of the storm, because I think that's a key element to their success.
Mini Miner, should Pablo and Chino be a little bit worried about the zones not going their way, given that they did have that off game when it didn't yesterday?
Well, I mean, we expected
340 points pour Chino Pablo.
I suppose they didn't bring that yesterday there. You know, the way that they performed throughout the majors so far, it was a bit rocky. They had some good performances. They showed signs of life, and then it just wasn't necessarily that consistent. But yesterday, they actually had the exact same average placement as Sky and Scroll. I said it yesterday. They almost played a lot like a Sky and Scroll sort of match history, and it was very impressive. But I think it's the sort of thing that we can expect from this team, Levin. But as Frankie correctly said,
on espère passer premier, les gars, ce soir. Vraiment, ce serait quand même assez génial.
You know, what fills me with confidence is what they did showcase when they made it to end games yesterday was that these guys have the power needed to find success. I'd argue I'd want to see a bit more from them, right? You know, they had the same exact average placement than Sky and Scroll had, but they actually were averaging lesser limbs, which I think most people maybe wouldn't expect out of those two, right? You almost expect these guys to have a bit more firepower, a bit more aggressive in those moments to get more limbs. So hopefully they can show us that side of their game today.
Well, Levin, now you've mentioned aggression, it's made me think of Sires and Scary, because similar to Pablo and Chino, right? They actually had some great zones. They land at Swift Shard, but they were putting up a fantastic fight as well.
I think these guys are the perfect example of like you know, a team who, yes, does get lucky, but really grabs at the opportunity, Vinny. I mean, there were so many situations where, like, these guys were put in positions where you could go, yeah, they got a good zone here or there, you know, they got a nice pullback on one of the half and half zones, but then they would just fight people and be aggressive, and they weren't playing scared. They weren't playing like a team who maybe doesn't have grand experience or doesn't have much expectation from themselves. They were just playing the day of their lives.
Yeah, it's right. And I think, you know, we obviously say, yeah, they got great zones yesterday. They got really lucky, I guess you could say, in that regard. But it's almost very easy to say that that was the reason for their success. But they also had to take that advantage. They had to take the opportunity that was given to them in those zones. And we often see teams that maybe are a little bit further down, less experienced in this situation, not taking advantage of those situations. But they played really, really well yesterday. They had the most amount of eliminations. They had the most amount of damage dealt as well yesterday. So a team that's on fire right now.
Another team that we're expecting to hopefully do well today, potentially come top 2, is Thomas and Focus Mini Miner, and they are landing on the west side of the map, Riptide, and they had a solid performance yesterday, but I think we can see more from them.
Oh, we can definitely see more from them. I think they, you know, of course, got very unlucky with the zones. They didn't get a single one. They almost had the worst day possible when it came to zones. They actually had the furthest distance traveled out of all of our teams yesterday, and they also took the most storm damage. So I think that sort of just paints the picture of how their day went. But they still managed to find success level, which is absolutely key. But I don't think they were too happy.
Ils ont fait un beau top 1 hier. Sur Gino et Pablo Wingu, je crois que c'est justement cette game là qui sont top 1. Ouais, c'est ça. Qui va mettre une très belle décale à Chino, voilà, comme ceci. La décale n'était pas dégueu. 7 minutes.
He should be sending, as should all the pro players, be sending lovely words to Zeke as they head to the lobby. Let's chat, though, about the changes to Net Surge, or Storm Surge. It's become Net Surge, I should say, for this season. It's clearly made an impact on all the players in the lobby. Some are coping better than others. And Mini Miner, can you talk to us, actually, about some of the changes that we've seen?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, the way the Storm Surge used to operate was total amount of damage that you dealt. It didn't take into account the amount of damage that you've taken. Now, this was the numbers from the 2025 Global Championships.
Ça correspond à quoi, ça?
From, of course, our top 5 finish at those Global Championships. And you can see the numbers, you know, they a lot of teams in this top 5, majority of them had that positive damage ratio. But I want you to remember that first place team, 1.31 damage ratio, quite low when you
C'est genre par seconde.
What did happen, I should say, yesterday.
Si ça, c'est vraiment une énorme dinguerie.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the damage ratios here, and there's much more of an importance on actually having a positive damage ratio. It's not possible to have, you know, players or teams who have negative damage ratios and are finding success, right? It just goes against the nature of how the mechanic works. And I think, again, you see that direct translation of just Sky and Scroll. The team we've been saying has been the best, most consistent team. They are the best when it comes to keeping their damage ratio high, right? They don't take much damage, but they're able to get damage off on other players at a very, very high clip. And so it's good to see that. It's interesting to see how that unfolds though for now the rest of the lobby as far as adjustments that need to be made from day 1 to day 2.
Well, there are a lot of jurors who are looking to make some changes as we head into day 2 and our final 6 games. So let's hear from Taka and Takata, because I'm interested to hear their thoughts on yesterday's action.
Moins de 5 minutes avant la première game.
Especially those teams that were struggling to try and establish their net surge. Here today, they have the opportunity to make some of those adaptations that Levin had just kind of referenced.
And I'm hoping that we see it. We could maybe see more sneaky plays. Even some of the most aggressive players have had difficult tournaments all over the world, not just in EU, but looking here at players like Sharkantini. I mean, these are incredibly aggressive players, and when you kind of have to focus on not taking damage as much as doing it, I'm curious to see what mix-ups we see. Even from Swizzy, we saw him practicing the off spawn, so I'm hoping to see a little bit more sneaky action, a little bit more kind of net surge focused plays, and then there's even duos like Darm and Demish who are kind of dropping all over the map. I think their most recent drop was Humble Hills, but they started somewhere else, and they've just been mixing it up throughout the whole day.
It's not really that surprising though to see Darm and Demish going on tour after what happened at Tip Top Terrace after all Takata, but for right now, we got to get back to the desk to see what else they've got to say.
Thank Thank you so much, guys. Now, it's not just about becoming the Major One
What the
champion
fuck?
today. It's also about qualifying for the Major One Summit at the PSD
Il
Bank
a offert
Dome
voilà
in
les...
Düsseldorf. And there are a lot of teams who are probably feeling very satisfied in the top 10 right now, feeling fairly secure, but anything can change. However, one thing that does have
Fuck,
to
le nombre de
change
subs.
is the focus for some of our Duos who are sitting outside the top 20 right now. So if we head to page 3, we'll see iDrop and Marius sat in 30th. Yeah, we're not looking at them to win, but hopefully 11 they can change things up enough to make more impact, because I feel like we barely saw them yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, you want to expect that from these guys, especially if you're Marius, right? Right now, it's looking like a Danish FNCS. All the Danish players are all celebrating excitedly at the top of the leaderboard. Which one of us is going to win another FNCS? And you have to remember, Marius was obviously that first Danish player to break that barrier and do it. He obviously had a great global championships, a great year, and he's sort of just having to watch it, you know, from the outside. He's like that one Squidward meme, right? And so ultimately, you want to see Marius sort of step up. You want to see him take things into his own hands. But it's a tough situation for them, Mini, right? Going back and watching a lot of their games, they're just having a tough time at Latte. There's so many different teams that it felt like we're just sort of roughing them up all over the POI. Players coming in, camping buildings, players on the outside, you know, taking shots at them when they had less favorable buff paths. And their games just looked rough. And so hopefully they can sort of get a grip on things and figure things out. But ultimately, you know, I reckon they're going to be in for another tough day.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been even worse for them as well. They had 4th place in that last game, which was when that zone, of course, pulled all the way up to Latte. So they could have been in much worse situation. But thankfully for them, they clutched up there. So hopefully they can bring that momentum into today.
And hopefully so can Akira and Karama, our gentle mates, French representatives. They're definitely going to be disappointed with yesterday's performance. Everything seemed to be going wrong for these guys. But there was a good reason for that, Mini Miner.
Yeah, after game number 3, they were surprise contested by Serena and Pixovsky down towards the south of that frigid fortress area that they were landing. And that really makes things difficult, Levin. When you are sort of, you know, a team of this caliber, a team that everyone's expecting to do well, then you start going down off spawn, you start having some troubles, then leaving that drop spot. It just changes things up so much. So now for a team that a lot of people would have expected to be in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, they're looking up just about hopefully making it into the top 20.
Yeah, it's really hard for them in that situation, especially because there were some games where like they lost the off spawn, but one of them would survive. And so you have the ability to revive your teammate, but we know how hard it can be when you're landing at a spot that's central to then have to completely switch up your idea about how you're going to play the game and recover the game. It's not going to be easy for them, but, you know, we'll have to see if they even stay contested, right? Because, you know, the team ended up leaving some of the last games. So they'll definitely be hoping that they can survive. I mean, I'm looking at this final page, Frankie, and I mean, it's hard to look at one of the teams here for sure.
I'm gonna try and be optimistic about this. Could we see a historical performance for the ages from Swizzy and Pixie? Attacker said they have been
Prochaine game très
practicing their
bientôt.
off-spawn. They were looking for volunteers yesterday at 11. Is it too late for these guys to make it to LAN?
No, because I think, you know, I look at how many points they're probably going to need today, right? And, you know, we sort of had that estimate of like around 300 odd points in that sort of range. Can these guys sort of average, you know, 60 points per game over the course of 5 games? I think they probably could, Mini. It's going to take a lot, though, because they really struggled off spawn here at Dark Dominion. Even when they weren't having problems with Truly, they were having problems here underneath the POI with teams sort of rotating in. You can see them getting snuck up on. You had Hydro and Kaito for 9 and Moneymaker constantly sneaking in the tunnels and stealing some of their loot from underground and just sandwiching them in. It was really rough and really nasty at times. I don't know what to expect at all, because I don't see what changes unless they just leave.
Yeah, well, now
Well,
they
I
have the
hope they've
context of what happened in day 1. Hopefully they can sort of learn from that, right? They're 2 very good players. You'd expect them to be winning those fights, but, you know, it's going to be difficult for them. It's not easy at all.
Well, if you're a Swizzy and Pixie fan, send them your best, because we are ready to board the battle bus. It's time for Game 7 with Taco and Takata.
Thank you guys so much. And I think what's really exciting about today, Takata, is all of the stipulations surrounding it. It's not
Et la
just
première
going
game
to
qui va se
the
lancer,
ranking
let's go, on a
for this
entendu le
Major One
bus.
Summit LAN, but we got to see what happens first, because Game 7's ready to go.
Despite my bias being from Spain, I would like to see some West zones today. I want to see, you know, the teams at the top prove that it's not all the zones. They have the experience and skills needed to continue that place. and I'd like to see them prove it. Regarding kind of the early game that we were alluding to, Taco with Swizzy, you were saying he's been practicing off.
Bon, Pixie Sweezy va falloir faire des bonnes games aujourd'hui. Gonzo qui tombe déjà le premier, les gars. Il s'est déjà fait tuer. Ça sent le bon gros retour au lobby, les gars. J'ai pas vu qui a pris le kill. Il y a déjà 2 teams, les gars. Lucha qui est mort. Ju qui est mort. C'est extrêmement rapide. On prie pour Pixie qui prenne pas un retour au lobby, les frérots. On a Chini Shark qui sont contest. À ce qui paraît, Vico a crash, les gars. Vico a crash, what? Non, les gars, c'est une dinguerie. C'est maintenant qu'on va falloir aller chercher une bonne game pour Pixie Sweezy. Donc on a Nathan, Reason et ouais, Reason il était tout seul ou quoi? Lucha qui vient de se faire finir, ça a mis longtemps. Ou alors il a peut-être juste pas pu être aise. Ok, Nathan il a un bon aim les gars. Darm et Demus les gars, qui ont fait une bonne perf hier. J'ai une putain de mouche les gars qui me tourne autour, c'est une dinguerie. Demus qui a déjà pas mal, un assez bon stuff, il lui manque un peu de matériaux, un peu de balles, mais sinon on a déjà pas mal de heal, on est full. On a c'est bien, 75 de mat pour Darm aussi qui est très bien même niveau du heal. On est sur un très bon début de game pour le duo. Attention à pas se faire contest par Solari et Darkos. Enfin Darkos et je sais plus qui. Attention on a Pixie Sweezy les gars. Va pas falloir mourir maintenant. On sait que ça a été compliqué hier notamment à part les petits backstabs qu'on se mangeait les gars. On se faisait prendre en 2v1.
The estimates we were saying around 250 to 300 when the day ends. But let's see.
Demus en sneaky les gars.
Kind of going all over the map pays off.
Darm et Demus en sneaky. Ça peut faire très mal, attention. On a été repéré. Et on va directement aller all-in. On va gratter une bonne balle. Le spawn ici il est pas incroyable avec tous les builds qu'on peut edit. Darm Demus qui sont très agressifs. On voit qu'ils veulent rattraper leur retard et essayer d'aller attraper le podium. Ils le veulent ce podium. Hein. Sharktini qui sont aussi en fight les gars. Et qui font pas un classement dingue, je crois qu'ils sont que top 15. Hein. Après, s'ils restent top 15, ils sont qualifs pour la LAN, mais... Attention, on est 4 dans la ville. Fichix qui est très très bien niveau stuff, il lui manque juste un petit peu de maths, mais sinon il est très très bien. Et on voit qu'ils se sont split la ville en deux, que pour l'instant ça va pas trop chercher le fight. Darm Demus toujours en fight, qui ont mis une très grosse balle à Darkos, mais Demus qui est low HP aussi. Darkos qui tombe. C'est fini pour la team de Darkos. On a déjà 4 points pour Darm. On voit Pablo les gars. Chino doit pas être très loin. On voit les 3e du classement les gars. C'est un peu des randoms. On connaît même pas leur visage. Mais ils font une assez bonne cup.
I'm trying to see if he can get the wraparound. The confidence, though, really starting to showcase itself after yesterday. Hard to also forget what took place. Saya's nearly had one of the most insane solo clutches that we've ever seen in a finals lobby, but Asa just tinkering around.
Attention à pas se prendre une méchante décale avec le build là. On a pris une grosse balle pour Scaryshon, il a pas fait le meilleur move. Siaz aussi. Est-ce que c'est la fin du duo? Siaz qui tombe. Ils ont pris deux mauvaises décisions les deux. Scaryshon qui a 75 HP mais qui va essayer de raise. Ou au moins de tempo pour essayer de 1v2, mais ça va très mal se finir. Scaryshon qui tombe, Siaz aussi. C'est fini pour les troisièmes du classement. Et attention, on va se faire backstab, on voit qu'il y a eu du fight. Ghosty et Glub. Forcément, avec ce pompe, on met extrêmement mal dans le corps. Du 153 en légendaire, je crois. Donc ça peut aller très vite. On est à la deuxième zone sur 12. Il reste encore 87 personnes, 46 duos. Il y a quelqu'un qui est solo. Par contre, il va falloir commencer à prendre un peu de dégâts parce qu'on a la Storm Surge qui va arriver très bientôt. Dans 3 kills. Shark et Tini qui sont encore en fight et qui vont très probablement se faire backstab. Donc il va falloir finir ce fight très vite. Enfin, fight. Ils se font mettre la pression par Fichix et Land. On n'a pas beaucoup de balles d'air pour Shark. Mais on a beaucoup de matériaux donc ça devrait aller. On est full bois, full métal. On a un kit, on a 6 places donc on peut tempo la zone. Voilà, on va aller chercher le high naturel. Chini qui est un peu moins bien en matériaux. To get a little recovery tour going, but now they've kind of overstayed their welcome. They're making themselves a little bit more susceptible even to potentially getting third party. I mean, you have to remember there's still Twek and Mydro over by Toy Box Docks that could decide to mosey on over once they hear some of those shots starting to ring out, and it's very believable that other teams would be drawn to the area.
Going back over to our number 1 duo though. They've been playing with each other for so long. And as Minnie was saying on the desk earlier, one thing to highlight from Sky and Scroll is they weren't as far as possible, as far as you can be from the zone, but they weren't pulling every zone either. Sky et Scroll qui ont fait un joli escalier. Hein. Ok, Vico qui a peut-être pas crash finalement, ou en tout cas il a pu revenir. Ça raise, hein. On voit qu'ils sont encore 89 alors que tout à l'heure ils étaient 87. On est sur une game très stack. On va arriver sur la zone 4, encore 90 joueurs, c'est énorme. On a encore tous les Avoc en vie les gars, je vois ça sur leur stream, ça fait plaisir. Même Pixie, même Sweezy. On voit Chap qui veut clairement tempo les heals. Mais est-ce qu'on chercherait pas à trop le tempo? Parce que les HP descendent très vite avec cette zone. Focus et Thomas HD qui sont en train de camper en zone également. Ils ont énormément de heal blanc, donc ils peuvent se le permettre. On voit qu'ils jouent tous la K. Hein. Comme quoi, elle est extrêmement forte. AK ou PM Rafale, il n'y a rien d'autre.
It's tough.
Attention,
it's not looking great.
on se
I
fait
know
tag.
Thomas he's locked in right
Ça
now,
veut
but
commencer à
he's gonna
gratter pour la Storm Surge, mais
This is how we're kicking
le
off
top qui
today.
ne descend
But,
toujours
I
pas.
mean, look,
On a 89
the
personnes pour
good news is
46
I
duos.
hope that, you know, they took the time
C'est absolument
to kind of
énorme en
settle
zone 4.
and prepare
Bientôt
for
zone
this.
5.
Scroll, though,
C'est
picking up another
démentiel.
elim,
Sky Scroll en
and
fight.
now they're looking very well off.
Yeah, Forg, I'm sorry, you
Et
had no
qui
business
ont fini le fight a
that
priori.
storm base from Sky and
Est-ce
Skrull.
que le
That
classement tomberait pas un
is-
peu, enfin le top?
That is actually wicked
Et non, le
work there,
top
though.
qui a pas bougé, donc ils
Casual
étaient
not gonna
peut-être pas,
complain about
peut-être pas en
4
fight, ils sont
additional
peut-être
elimination
allés sur un
points
lieu de
here.
fight, mais
Yapko Panzer,
Storm Surge
team
qui arrive
that
alors qu'on est
is
encore
just
89, c'est
inside
absolument aberrant.
that top 20 threshold currently, but obviously there's more at stake than just that land qualification spot for the Major 1 Summit. Everybody wants to also earn as much prizing as they can from this Major 1 Grand Finals, and for Yapko and Panzer,
On voit Sharketini qui ont pris
tend to
une
just stay a
hauteur
little bit
monstrueuse.
tucked away from the rest of the commotion, but Shark Teeny, time to get a move on. Trying to block off shots best they can. 251 above right now on their damage threshold. So, both teams will at least leave intact from Wonky Land. Question now is just, what are they going to do to prove that surviving Wonky Land is going to net a nice end game?
Thing is, yeah, it's
On est
more
plus que
than just
88.
winning Wonky Land, right? It's a POI where you can rotate late out of. You have incredibly good, you know, rotation opportunities with the Wonky Wheel, low missed overdrive combo. But Shark Teeny is a team that wanted to kind of block Huddy and Fishy from making it to Summit 1. And after finishing 21st day 1, now I think they're just focused on kind of cementing themselves in a better place on the leaderboard. But speak of Huddy and Fishy, both players now have gone down.
And it's Vico Malabuca. They're gonna be the ones to shut them out.
Vico qui a pris un kill